Hello everybody and welcome to our coverage of the 2023 Sorcery Contested Realm Tournament of Champions. My name's Meulman-Marshall and I'm going to be your commentator today on the finals between Ira and Zalem. So Ira's playing Deathspeaker, a deck that Ira's been enjoying and championing throughout the seasons of the league in 2023, and Zalem on the Enchantress, a bit of a dark horse in the Tournament of Champions, which has made it all the way to the finals. I can't wait to watch this match, see how it ends up and see how these two powerhouse players, the 1 and 2 seed going into the Tournament of Champions, match up head to head in the finals. Before we dive into the gameplay, we're just going to take a quick look at the deck lists of the two players, some of the interesting features of their decks, some of the interesting card choices, and the things that you might expect to see throughout the game. So let's take a look at Ira's deck list. Ira, of course, the 2nd seed coming into the Tournament of Champions, a fantastic record across the first 3 seasons of the league in 2023, and worth mentioning, someone who's put a lot of time and energy into organising the league as well. So well done, Ira, on making it all the way to the finals with Deathspeaker, a deck that Ira has been tuning and playing all throughout those seasons of the league, much like many other players who've sort of developed a preference for a particular deck or one that they really enjoy and have spent a lot of time working on it to make it as good as it can be to suit their own playstyle. So Ira has got some really interesting choices compared to a lot of other Deathspeaker decks that you'll see in the metagame. I also played Deathspeaker in this Tournament of Champions, fell to Zalem's Enchantress deck in the quarterfinals, so I was super interested to see how Ira went, playing Deathspeaker with a few differences here against Zalem's Enchantress. So Ira's deck, different to a lot of Deathspeakers that are relying on the Nimbus Djinn and Summoning Sphere combo to threaten a whole lot of damage using cards in hand. Ira's deck is utilising Ruler of Thule and Ratanus Titan as the two main ways of getting larger amounts of damage in on what you might call a combo turn. So Ruler of Thule, of course, you can use any minions that you've amassed on your back row, so that can be things like Wizards or Highland Princess or Land Surveyors. All these 1 power minions or even 0 power Grandmaster Wizards can all of a sudden get a buff of an additional power and then both get a buff and attack from your back row onto your opponent's back row and deal some damage unexpectedly. So Ruler of Thule allows you to get that additional damage, turn your 1s into 2s and your 0s into 1s, and also be able to attack with those minions that are sitting there, hopefully a little bit safe on your back row, and get a whole lot of damage in one sort of big combo turn. You can also use the Summoning Sphere that's in the deck with the Ratanus Titan to land a Ratanus Titan right on your opponent's head, and if you combo that with the Ruler of Thule, then of course you get the additional damage from the damage buff, and you end up hitting for 7 with the Ratanus Titan instead of the 6. The other ways that the deck can get damage in using Chaos Twister to try and land an enemy's minion on top of their own head. And then you've got, of course, the Violent. If your opponent is playing like a Battle Mage or an Avatar of Earth that's going to come a bit closer into your territory, then they're going to be adjacent to your sites and you can use your Violence. And of course, you can use the Violent through the Summoning Sphere to get some damage in that way as well, if you can manage to keep a Summoning Sphere on your opponent's side of the board. But in this particular matchup, of course, Summoning Sphere is a lot more vulnerable because the Enchantress can animate any Summoning Sphere that's overlapping the void and kill it, and of course can just animate the enemy Summoning Sphere and then attack it, because Summoning Sphere is only a 1-cost minion. It's only going to be only 1-cost aura, I should say. It's only going to be a 1-power minion and therefore very easy to remove. So Summoning Sphere and Violent is a less reliable sort of long game grindy avenue to get damage in, and Ira's instead going to have to rely on the Ruler of Thule and Ratanus Titan as well as any chip damage, or hope that Zalem sends the Avatar into harm's way and is adjacent to Ira's own sites so that Ira can use the Violent's Genesis ability that way. So let's take a look at Zalem's deck, the Enchantress control deck. And we should give some context here. Zalem was the number 1 seed coming into the Tournament of Champions, has made it all the way to the final. Zalem has performed super well and consistently across the 3 seasons of the league this year, earning Zalem that number 1 seed spot. And throughout those 3 seasons, Zalem has pioneered lots of different ways of playing the game, lots of different decks, and it's just been a pleasure to watch the ideas that Zalem has come up with and the different ways that Zalem's tried to use the card pool to find some small advantages here and there, try out different cards, try out different strategies that perhaps other people had written off. And of course, when you look at this deck list here, you'll see things like Twist of Fate in the Magic slot, something that I think not a lot of people go into the Tournament of Champions. If you had polled them on the cards that would be in the finalist deck lists in the grand final, I don't think you would have had many people picking Twist of Fate in their top 10, 20, or even 200 cards in the set that they thought they might be present in those top 2 deck lists. But there it is, a copy of Twist of Fate, which Zalem has managed to find a really great home for here in the Enchantress control list. So of course, Enchantress itself has that ability to animate auras, and it's interesting that for an aura-based deck, Zalem's only got 9 auras in this deck. Right? So the focus here really is not on jamming as many auras as possible and trying to animate them all and attack your opponents. It's trying to use some particular auras that have both high mana cost, so therefore high power when they're animated, but also have some abilities that affect the game straight away and can give you some other advantage while they're not in minion form, to really swing the game in your favor. And one of the things that Zalem does, I think, very well with this is utilize the threat of particularly Wildfire and Thunderstorm using their end of turn abilities in a way that's very difficult to avoid. So on the same turn that you play the Wildfire or the Thunderstorm, you're threatening to do 3 damage with them. You know, Wildfire is harder to avoid, Thunderstorm affects a larger area, but it's also a bit more random, but nonetheless they're both threatening 3 damage in a way that it's very hard for the opponent to do anything about because it happens straight away on the turn you play them, or at least at the end of that turn. They both are also minions in Enchantress, or auras that are threatening to be minions in Enchantress that can attack you for 4. So you do have to be really aware of that as the other player as well. And they're also hard to deal with because on the opponent's turn, after you play them onto the board, they're not yet minions. So a lot of things that would kill minions are not going to kill them yet. So your opponent has to rely on placing out blockers or having some kind of aura removal to deal with them and stop you from being able to attack with them. So Zalem's trying to rely on that. It's sort of a pseudo evasion that the auras have, or resistance to removal and resilience to removal, because they're not in minion form on your opponent's turn after you play them. And then the following turn when you animate them, they can attack because they've already, as cards, been in play for a longer than the start of that turn. So you sort of have pseudo charge on them, if you like. It's either pseudo charge or pseudo resilience to removal, whichever way you want to look at it. Then we've got the self-same simulacrum, which can copy them. It can either copy your own auras once they're animated, or it can copy the other minions in the deck, whether it's Grandmaster Wizard or Death Dealer or Highland Princess, all of which have really powerful Genesis abilities. Or, of course, self-same simulacrum has the ability to copy your opponent's best minion on the board that will give you the best strategic advantage. So it's just a really flexible minion in the deck, and this deck playing the full complement of 2 of those. As they're elites, you can only have 2 of them in the deck. So we do have that card advantage here from the Apprentice Wizard, the Grandmaster Wizard, giving Zalem the ability to both dig deeper into the deck, as well as set up spellcasters crucially on the board that can do things like cast the Wildfire, because the Wildfire has to be cast a couple of steps from the caster. It means you don't have to move your Enchantress forward. You can use the Wizards to cast out those Wildfires. You can also use them for things like the Poison Nova in the deck that relies on proximity, as well as anything else. Just trying to have a look through the deck list here. Major Explosion, of course. So 2 copies of Major Explosion is another way that you can utilize your spellcasters other than your avatar and try and get that Major Explosion deeper into enemy territory in such a way that it's not going to harm your avatar itself. So quite a few options here to deal significant amounts of damage very quickly, either through the aforementioned Wildfire or Thunderstorm, or through animating an Atlantean Fate or Abundance and attacking for 5, or using those big spells like Major Explosion, or of course that cheeky Twist of Fate that I mentioned earlier against aggro decks. And Abundance itself plays very well, of course, with Twist of Fate, because it gives you a plethora of mana, so it wouldn't be beyond the realms of possibility to use a Twist of Fate to swish those life totals around for 12 or even 16 life if you had an Abundance or 2 in play, and you could really change the course of a game with a Twist of Fate with that much mana. Then there are, of course, the artifacts as the acceleration from the cores, the 3 cores, Amethyst, Aquamarine, and Ruby, and then you've got the 2 mixes as well that can help power out either a Death Dealer or an early Wildfire. They can also help to cast things like Pact with the Devil, Poison Nova, or Major Explosion, some very expensive and very powerful fire spells. The other great thing to mention about the 1-cost artifacts is that they're cheap and easy ways to trigger the Enchantress's ability on the turn that you need to turn your auras into minions. So a really balanced, really interesting, really innovative deck using an avatar that hasn't seen a lot of play throughout the leagues, but Zalem's made it all the way to the finals. So well done, Zalem. Let's see how it goes.
All right. I
So here we are with the Sorcery League Finals for the Tournament of Champions. This is a really exciting matchup between Zalem and Ira. So Zalem was the #1 seed coming into the League Finals and made it all the way to the final. This Tournament of Champions was originally going to be an invite-only tournament. Turned out to be the biggest Sorcery tournament that's ever been run. And Ira and Zalem are two of the top two seeds coming into it based on the performance that they both had in the league seasons throughout 2023. So it truly is a matchup of the Titans, and we've got Zalem here starting off with a Mixed Ignis on turn 1, followed up by Ira with a Tower into a Ruby Core. So a little bit of acceleration from both players. Zalem on Enchantress, and playing out an Oasis now, which is a water site and a fire site, so providing a mix of thresholds there, along with Zalem's mix, to potentially allow Zalem to accelerate into an aura. Ira here has now on turn 2 played another site, bringing them up to 3 mana with the mana from the core. So a few options there in Ira's hand, which we can see at the moment, of an Apprentice Wizard, for example, or a Common Sense, both of which are playable. So Ira, instead of the Ruins, they're switching out to the Step, playing the Apprentice Wizard and drawing a spell. And a Ratanus Titan. So not exactly the draw that Ira would have wanted there in an early turn. Ratanus Titan, of course, one of the finishers in Ira's deck. Really what you want to see early as the Deathspeaker player here is things like Apprentice Wizard that get you additional cards and allow you to accelerate your game plan to get the card advantage that you need to outpace this Enchantress deck. And Grandmaster Wizard there, the perfect draw for Ira. So Ira already sitting on one piece of acceleration from the Ruby Core. The Grandmaster Wizard now going to be able to come down a turn earlier than it otherwise would have. And then the Boneyard even in hand to be able to reanimate the Grandmaster Wizard is amazing. So Zalem, although had the Mixed Ignis on turn 1, didn't have a Wildfire or anything else to accelerate into, which has meant that there's very little pressure being placed on Ira. So the draw of that Ratanus Titan not really punishing Ira. And instead, Ira's still sitting on 20, heading into being able to play that Grandmaster Wizard in 2 turns' time. So Zalem plays down a Thunderstorm now. And the Thunderstorm is going to deal 3 to Ira's Deathspeaker at the end of the turn, immediately taking Ira down to 17, and then the Thunderstorm is going to move back. So Thunderstorm, of course, a flexible aura that deals 3 damage to a random unit in its affected area, and then Zalem's moved it back, and the reason that Zalem's moved it back there to a square, to an area with 4 sites underneath it, so no void spaces, is that when Enchantress animates an aura and turns it into a minion, if there's a void space on any of the 4 spaces underneath it, if it's an aura that occupies 4 spaces, then the minion will die immediately. So on the original space where Zalem placed that Thunderstorm, if Zalem had on their next turn used the Enchantress's ability to turn the Thunderstorm into a minion, it would have died because there's no sight on square 17. So moving it back there so that next turn it's threatening to be animated and attack Ira. So on Ira's turn here, Ira's found the Philosopher's Stone, which, incredible, is super important for this Deathspeaker deck. 4 elements being played in Ira's deck, meaning that the Philosopher's Stone can potentially deliver up to 4 mana discount on every turn. And even more if Ira swaps that stone around between different spellcasters on the same turn. So really just a huge play.
Without attacking. Can you intercept? Since I'm already here, I'm not technically entering the site, correct?
So Zalem is considering whether they should animate the Thunderstorm and then move the Thunderstorm across. And they've got a second Thunderstorm. So that second Thunderstorm, as I discussed with the last turn, is that the Thunderstorm that is now on top of the Deathspeaker can still strike Ira's Deathspeaker, and then it can move back to that middle section of the board so that it can potentially be animated on Zalem's next turn. And this Fey Changeling here is really demonstrating the importance of those small minions in the Deathspeaker deck, because Zalem had moved that Thunderstorm back. Zalem only gets to have the Thunderstorm for 3 turns, remember, because it does expire eventually. But what the Thunderstorm can do is deal the 3 damage initially, move back to that block of 4 sites, so there's no void squares underneath it, and then animate the following turn attack. But because Ira had that Fey changing there to block, Zalem's Thunderstorm remained unanimated in a situation where he otherwise could have animated it, and just struck the Fey changeling to get rid of it. So a real speed bump being placed by Ira there in the form of that Fey changeling, now allowing Ira to get up to the amount of mana necessary to play the Grandmaster Wizard and still have 1 left over thanks to the Philosopher's Stone. So 6 mana at the start of Ira's turn, 5 will be spent on this Grandmaster Wizard, deciding which of the Thunderstorms the Grandmaster Wizard is going to be placed underneath.
5 mana.
It's going to be underneath the Thunderstorm that has 1 counter left on it. And those 3 cards, so really good that for Ira that they drew 2 2-drops. So they've got the choice. Well, they couldn't play the Highland Princess because although they had 1 mana left, the air discount has already been used on the Grandmaster Wizard this turn. So Ira had to play the Vile Imp there.
Animating this then?
But that's still great for Ira. Still another blocker. So Ira now has 2 blockers in play that can cover both of Zalem's Thunderstorms if Zalem was to animate both of them. So that first Thunderstorm that's down to 1 counter being animated is the Grandmaster Wizard blocking. And then the Pillar of Xeros from Zalem. It's a unique. It's only 1 in the deck. It's the biggest way to hose Deathspeaker.
And then it drew like
and Zalem had it, managed to bait out the Grandmaster Wizard block, and then get rid of the Grandmaster Wizard from the cemetery, which is worth so many cards here. It's at least 3 more cards that Ira would have been able to draw next turn, but little did Zalem know that Ira actually has this Boneyard in hand and was planning to bring back the Grandmaster Wizard to play, only to have it die again later and draw another 3 cards. So that was a hugely fortuitous play. And I think Zalem was saying in the commentary here at the time that they kept that Pillar of Xeros in their opening hand, which actually caused them some threshold issues early in the game, but proving to be worthwhile as a play for the long game there.
I'll play Boneyard.
So this Boneyard coming down now, it is going to get back that Vile Imp. So although the Pillar of Xeros got rid of the Grandmaster Wizard, it also got rid of all the minions in Zalem's cemetery. Of which there weren't any. And that Vile Imp is going to do 2 to the Apprentice Wizard, clear off a little bit of the board. And then the Highland Princess is going to come down to be another blocker in case that Thunderstorm that has 1 counter left tries to animate an attack. So Ira really protecting their life total very well in the face of Thunderstorms that are threatening huge amounts of damage. So if Ira didn't have as many blockers as they've had, and if they weren't so judicious in making sure they had sufficient blockers each turn to block Zalem's auras, Zalem would have been able to be chunking them for 4 damage each time one of those Thunderstorms goes unblocked. But instead, Ira's managed to make it through the Thunderstorm. So they're now going to expire. One's expired, the other one's about to expire next turn. And Ira's now got the card advantage in terms of 5 cards in hand to Zalem's now 3, even though it's Zalem's turn. And Ira's got a Grandmaster Wizard there in hand. And of course, this is proved to be a little bit of a punishing draw here for Zalem. 3 Apprentice Wizards already in play on Zalem's side, which is exactly the card that Zalem doesn't want to see in this matchup. Because, of course, the Deathspeaker can make use of Zalem's Apprentice Wizards when they go into the cemetery, because the Deathspeaker can be used on either player's cemetery to bring back minions. So Ira are really happy to see Zalem piling up those Apprentice Wizards. Ira's Vile Imp coming in to block that Thunderstorm again, so preserving that life total, still on 14, despite now 2 Thunderstorms having been and gone by the end of this turn.
Kill all of them if they pile up there.
And the 4th Apprentice Wizard comes down. Zalem saying, don't want to pile them all up on that home side so that a Firebolt can take them out. So one of them comes in off to the side there.
Past you.
Draws Zalem a spell. Enchantress draws Zalem a sight, and then the Thunderstorm number 2 expires.
I feel like that was all right.
So Ira's now looking at this Grandmaster Wizard in hand, going to be able to draw some more gas, and still having that Disenchant in hand. And this is a crucial thing. So Ira's decklist only has 1 Disenchant. Ira common sensed for that Disenchant early.
I do.
And if Ira had have used that on either of the thunderstorms as an easy way to deal with them early, then Zalem would know for the rest of the game that there's no disenchant threat. But instead, by keeping that in hand, Ira's making sure that Zalem has to honour that disenchant and not stack up too many auras on top of Ira's Deathspeaker, for example, or on any particular strategic location in the realm on the board. So here we've got another Violent coming down, taking out the Apprentice Wizard. And then Ira's got a hand chock full of removal, which, honestly, that was a pretty bad Grandmaster Wizard for Ira. Yes, the Fey Changeling is going to let Ira potentially bounce the Grandmaster Wizard and then play it again, which is one of the really interesting synergies in Ira's deck. So here the Fey Changeling comes down, bounces the Wizard, and then Ira's got that again for next turn. So that ability to bounce your own Grandmaster Wizards using your Fey Changelings is an excellent method of making sure that you don't run out of momentum once you do hit those key card advantage pieces in your deck. And Fey Changing, of course, having the flexibility to also be a tempo play if you return enemy minions. But even against decks like Zalem's, where the idea of returning Zalem's minions to hand is actually often actively bad, because you don't want to return those expiring auras like Wildfire and Thunderstorm, and you don't want to return Genesis Wizards to Zalem's hand. So even in this matchup where the Fey Changelings, you're not often using them against your opponent, to return your own minions like Grandmaster Wizard can be a huge play. So Zalem now playing out their own Grandmaster Wizard, another core on Ira's side. So yes, Ira's got all of the acceleration now, just missing the Aquamarine core, got the Philosopher's Stone and 3 cores. Ira's got a bunch of sites, bunch of cards in hand, but they're not the best cards at the moment. The thing, though, for Zalem is that Zalem's staring down Ira having a Grandmaster Wizard in hand, now a Grandmaster Wizard, which Ira's just banished from Zalem's Cemetery, so another 3 cards. Ira's only got 21 cards left in their spell book, so you're sort of looking at probably in 3 more turns' time or thereabouts, depending on exactly what happens, Ira's going to be getting close to drawing their whole deck. And you would think that most decks in Sorcery, particularly, Ira's made it all the way to the finals, they will be looking at that thinking, well, if Ira's going to draw their whole deck in or thereabouts in about the next 3 or 4 turns, they're probably going to have the tools to kill me at that point. If we have a look at what's left in Ira's deck there, got the Atlantean Fate, which is a good defensive play, but there's also that Ruler of Thul and that Summoning Sphere, which are sort of the key killers in Ira's deck. The Ratanus Titan already in hand, which is going to combo with the Summoning Sphere to chunk Zalem for 6. But Ira's also, at this point, probably not been able to get as much out of these smaller minions in terms of offensive damage as they would have liked. So Zalem's still on 19 life. The amount of damage that Ira's combo turn of the Ratanus Titan and the Ruler of Thul does is relatively small, unless Ira's able to amass a number of 1-power minions on Ira's side of the board, which Ira can then attack with using the Ruler of Thul's buff and the Ruler of Thul's ability. So basically every one of the 1-power minions like Fey Changeling or Apprentice Wizard or Land Surveyor that Ira's able to amass on their own home site, where the Deathspeaker is right now, is 2 life that Ira's going to be able to take off Zalem on that turn they play Ruler of Thul. So you got 3 from the Ruler of Thul, you got 6 from the Ratanus Titan, that's 9. Then to get to 19, they're going to need another 5 minions. 5 at least 1-power minions to be able to attack alongside the Ruler of Thul to get Zalem to Death Door that turn. So it's really interesting. Ira would have been hoping that these 2 Vile-Imps and the Apprentice Wizard that Ira's got on the right-hand side of the board there on the Boneyard would have been able to get in for a little bit more damage to reduce that amount that Ira has to do on that key combo turn. But instead, this Apprentice Wizard comes in and poison Novas, the Fey Changeling, and 2 of the Vile-Imps, and takes out a whole lot of Ira's board position. So this is actually a really key play, and Poison Nova not often a card that you think of as being super strong against Deathspeaker. Generally Deathspeaker's minions are dispensable, and it doesn't really mind too much if you get rid of these tiny minions off the board. It's just going to use them again from the cemetery anyway. But with the way that this game is playing out, Ira's really not chunking little bits of damage off Zalem and chipping away at Zalem's life total in the way that Zalem would have liked.
So yeah, we'll just
So interestingly here, there was a bit of a mix-up
we'll just use
because
the mix to cast the wildfire
Zalem
with
used
the
a
Enchantress
mix,
then.
which was being held by the Enchantress, and the mix gives the Bearer's next spell a discount. But Zalem was attempting to cast both of their spells this turn, being the Poison Nova and the Wildfire, both off the Apprentice Wizard. And because the discount was applying to spells cast by the Enchantress, and both Poison Nova and Wildfire have proximity restrictions, which is why Zalem wanted to cast them off the Apprentice Wizard, Zalem had to, instead of casting the Wildfire on top of Ira's Deathspeaker, had to cast the Wildfire off to the side, 2 steps away from the Enchantress, who had to cast it, because the Enchantress is the one that had the mixed discount. So that was a really important pickup from Ira in terms of noticing that. And a really important difference, I think, in this game here, because if that Wildfire was on top of the Deathspeaker, that would be a lot more damage that is threatening to be done next turn to Ira. So it'd be 3 damage at the end of turn from the Wildfire, and then potentially a Wildfire attacking in for 4 if Zalem could clear the path to attack with it next turn. So Ira now drawing a couple of Land Surveyors, also got a Common Sense, Violent, so a few more minions that Ira can try and use to build up another little army to attack with the Ruler of Thul. But Zalem at this point has access to Ira's deck list and is going to know that that's what Ira's trying to do. You know, Zalem knows that Ira's deck relies on little bits of chip damage, relies on a bit of a different combo turn to the Nimbus Djinn Deathspeaker decks, and is using that Ruler of Thul plus the Raytanus Titan plus lots of little weenies to try and get to a lethal amount of damage. So you can see here Ira assembling the army on their own side of the board. There's the Grandmaster Wizard, there's the Foot Soldier, there's the Land Surveyor, and then next turn Ira's got, you know, another Land Surveyor and potentially another minion off the Common Sense to add to that little army, hoping that, you know, in 2 turns time they'll be able to get in for the Alpha Strike. So double checking the Cemetery here as the last thing on their turn, or potentially the last thing on their turn. Looks like they've still got 4 mana left, so probably going to be another play after this. But 2 mana on the Highland Princess gets that last core out of the deck. At this point, yeah, the mana's useful because Ira's just got so many things to do with mana. But more importantly, I think is the deck thinning to get Ira closer to drawing that Ruler of Thul and being able to use this little army of weenies before Zalem can use their own tools to remove those small minions from the board.
You spent 11 mana. So you spent 1 on the Aquamarine Core.
And here's an interesting play here. The players are tallying up the mana that Ira's used this turn. With so many small spells, it is really hard at times to keep track of. Ira's using those little red counters to track the Philosopher's Stone discounts for each element as they claim the discounts, and then using the manual board tracker here for mana. And Ira's now using what is a really cheeky little trick. Drops the Philosopher's Stone off the Avatar, gives it to the Grandmaster Wizard, plays the Land Surveyor using the discount for Earth, which I had already used earlier in the turn using the Deathspeaker, but now is able to use the discount off the Grandmaster Wizard as well, because the Grandmaster Wizard now has the Philosopher's Stone. And then each unit is able to use the ability drop artifacts once and the ability pick up artifacts once. So the Deathspeaker drops the Philosopher's Stone, the Grandmaster Wizard picks it up, then the Grandmaster Wizard drops it and the Deathspeaker picks it up. So they're able to hand it back between each other, and in the process Ira is able to claim an additional discount to play that Land Surveyor. But it turned out to be actually in Zalem's interest for that extra Land Surveyor to come down that turn, because the Death Dealer just clears the board. So at this point, you know, Ira was, I think, when they ended that last turn, probably feeling pretty confident. The army was assembling. They were feeling like, as long as they drew the Ruler of Thul and the Summoning Sphere in the next couple of turns, they were going to be, they had enough resources to get Zalem down to Death's Door. But now with no minions on the board, we're back to the position where the combo turn that Ira is able to assemble, even if they drew Summoning Sphere and Ruler of Thul right now, is back to being 9. So that's not quite enough when Zalem's at 19.
Okay.
And Zalem hitting, because of the Death Dealer, of course, able to use the Death Dealer to kill all minions, getting rid of all the blockers, and then hit Ira for 4 with the Wildfire. So that's just showing you as well the power of Death Dealer in Enchantress, when you can use the Death Dealer's ability to kill all minions while your auras are not minions, and then play another cheap spell in the core there to animate the Wildfire and turn it into a minion and attack on an empty board. So effectively a one-sided board wipe for Zalem there, which is pretty cool. So off that Grandmaster Wizard,
Oh yeah.
Aquabrain Core.
I still flooded.
Ira drew
Yeah, I saw this.
2 Land Surveyors.
I saw this only too
And
late.
Zalem
As soon as I passed around, I was like, oh,
cries
crap.
out in agony, realizing that they had left themselves open to a pretty strong Atlantean Fate there, getting rid of 2 cores and getting rid of both minions that Zalem had on the board, the Wildfire and the Death Dealer. So that's a really high value Atlantean Fate for Ira. I mean, Atlantean Fate can be great. It's got a lot of upside. It's one of the most powerful cards in the game. But when you get to get rid of 2 artifacts, 2 mana rocks that your opponent's using it to power out their plays, and you get rid of their only 2 minions on the board, it doesn't get much better than that. As far as Atlantean Fates go. Luckily for Zalem, the only saving grace here is that Zalem wasn't relying on the fire threshold from those 2 Oasis. They've still got 2 other fire threshold from the Ruins and the Desert. The other thing worth pointing out here is that Ira is deliberately keeping Site 17, or Void Space 17 and 19 free of sites, and this is a crucial play against Enchantress. What it does is it prevents Zalem from making a play like this, putting the Thunderstorm overlapping the Avatar, and then being able to animate it as a minion and attack the following turn. Because Ira's leaving that void space there on 17 and 19 on either side of the Avatar, those auras that take up 4 spaces can never be turned into minions there without dying to those void spaces. So it's a little defense mechanism that the player playing against the Enchantress can use to stop the Enchantress from being able to both attack them on that site using the abilities like Thunderstorm, well, not attack them, but harm them, using the abilities like Thunderstorm Strike, and then subsequently animate an attack. Because Zalem can't even animate the Thunderstorm and then attack back into the middle of the board, because the moment that Zalem animates the Thunderstorm overlapping the void, it dies.
I've never seen you play.
But nonetheless, Zalem rolled well on the random strike and managed to hit Ira down to 6.
So thoughtfully.
So although Ira's got a lot of minions now, you know, those 2 Land Surveyors trying to protect the Avatar from things like this random Thunderstorm strike, the Thunderstorm finds the way through. You know, chunks that 3 life off the Deathspeaker, and you can see when you start adding together 3s and 4s and 3s and 4s, it can add up to 20 pretty quickly. And Zalem's already got Ira now down to 6.
Let's play a floodplain.
So no target for that Chaos Twister. A brave play here from Ira, filling that void in, void number 17 with a floodplain. You could hear a bit of an exclamation here from Zalem, sort of saying, oh, okay, that's an opening that I don't mind seeing. But Ira's making the calculated decision that now's the time, that it is okay to open up that extra avenue of attack, because it really takes Zalem 2 more turns to exploit it. You know, Zalem has to play a Thunderstorm or other aura overlapping space 17 now, plus overlapping the Deathspeaker, and then animate it the following turn to be able to attack. Ira's hoping, I think, that on their next turn, they'll be able to Alpha Strike here.
1, 2, 3, 4.
And Ira's playing an Earthquake, so one of the really powerful things that Earthquake can allow you to do is rearrange sites. Even if you're not submerging anything, just the act of rearranging sites can be so important. And this is a great example of why. Because that Thunderstorm now is not overlapping Ira's Avatar at all. So Ira is certain that on their next turn, absent Zalem having some kind of shenanigans to get a Rift Valley or something to move that step back into that void space and fill in the void so that they can animate the Thunderstorm. Short of that, there's no way that Zalem's going to be able to hit Ira's Avatar with that Thunderstorm next turn. So although the Earthquake, didn't bury anything of Zalem's, it actually potentially saved Ira from a really key 3 damage from that Thunderstorm strike next turn.
See if we can do something here. We'll Riptide
the other thing worth noting is, of course,
all those yummy
the artifacts do not get burrowed or buried by the
spell?
Earthquake. The artifacts don't get burrowed by the earthquake because they were on a water site at the time.
Doesn't do it.
Because Ira used the floodplain that was adjacent to the Gothic Tower to flood the tower, which then you can't burrow things on a water site. So when Earthquake tried to burrow them, Earthquake says, if able, and it wasn't able to burrow the artifacts that Ira's Deathspeaker was carrying, or anything else on that site, any minions, on the Gothic Tower because it was a water site at the time. And Ira's also used the opportunity to get the land surveyors off to probably safer ground over in the corner. Zalem then has used Riptide to bring Ira's Deathspeaker forward, which is interesting. I'd be interested to know from Zalem why they didn't drag the Deathspeaker back underneath the Thunderstorm
We'll see if I draw it.
for 3 damage that turn, and why they elected to drag the Deathspeaker
So I'll
forward
play
instead,
commentates.
and then move the Thunderstorm across, because, you know, potentially gave Ira another turn.
These firebolts. That
So
is
Ira grabs a
1 minute.
Firebolt,
I will shuffle. Thank you.
which
I
is going to be
will
another 3
spend
damage that Ira can threaten
2
onto
mana.
Zalem.
That was my earth.
But Ira
I'll
hasn't
spend 2
quite
mana
got the combo in hand. So
a
still no Summoning
Pierce
Sphere, still no Ruler of Thule.
2
So it's just that Rotanus Titan and the 2 Land Surveyors and the Firebolts, which is really not going to be enough. And Zalem now with that Wildfire and the Thunderstorm Strike, really threatening a lot of damage. So this, you know, I spoke earlier on on the turn when Ira, I think, drew that Earthquake and Bury and Bury.
Long time coming.
Those cards not particularly effective against Enchantress.
Counted.
They're not doing anything against the auras whilst they're not animated. Ira does have the option to disenchant one of Zalem's auras here to try and buy themselves a little bit more time.
I'm just gonna. I may end up taking this back, but that's.
So Ira's just mathing this out now here and having a look at
And these guys,
what
and then
would the amount of damage that they can output look like without the Summoning Sphere and Rotanus Titan. Oh no, so they've got the Summoning Sphere now in hand. I missed that.
I think
So they're mathing out what is the amount of damage they could output, and is it going to get Zalem to Death's Door? So we've got 3 from the Ruler of Thule, then we've got 6 from the Rotanus Titan, so that's 9, and then we've got 2 and 2 from the Land Surveyors, so 4 in total. So 9 plus 4 is exactly 13.
ruin.
So Ira saying finally when they drew the Ruler of Thule,
Titan.
and the combo
Actually, power
with
6,
Zalem at 13 is going to be exactly the right amount of damage to get Zalem down to Death's Door.
and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and I do have to attack this.
So there we go, Zalem going down to 0. So
Okay.
from Ira's side, a sigh of relief that the combo has
Okay, yeah,
come
thank you.
off, and there's the Firebolts in
believe-
hand to finish the game.
2 cards in my deck. This guy took a
And
long
now
time to show up.
Zalem
No.
is at the point where they're thinking, can I defend my Enchantress well enough that Ira's going to run out of ways to kill me?
Wait, do you have?
Because if Zalem can realistically think about running Ira out of threats here, because although Ira's got Zalem to Death's Door first, Ira has to land that killing blow, and Firebolts Zalem knows about.
Yeah, 2.
I do have a
But if Zalem can get rid of that Rotanus Titan, the Land Surveyors are a bit out of position. They're not going to be able to hit the Enchantress anytime soon. So's the Ruler of Thule.
Played that already.
No, it's still in my hand.
Oh,
But Ira still has that disenchant, meaning that any of Zalem's animated minions, if Zalem tries to animate the Wildfire and put it in front, say move it across onto the Oasis to put it in front of the Firebolts, that's not going to be enough.
So I think that's game.
Because Ira's going to be able to move the Deathspeaker across
Yeah, so this will just move here at the end of
and
the turn.
disenchant the Wildfire.
We'll draw.
So at this point it looks like, yeah, the combo of disenchant plus Firebolts is probably going to be enough for Ira to get through most things that Zalem can put in the way. But Zalem having a last-ditch check, is there anything that'll save me from those Firebolts?
Okay.
Zalem, of course, knows about the disenchant,
for it.
both because of Ira's deck list, and Ira's almost drawn their whole deck, but also because of the common sense earlier in the game.
Copy, I think.
So the self-same Simulacrum coming down,
Oh right, yeah, the disenchant.
and that is potentially something that could save Zalem here.
Sorry, yeah, disenchant plus Chaos Twister plus Firebolts. Yeah. Okay.
So if Zalem
Yeah,
was
copy
to
your
turn that
Titan,
into a Rotanus Titan, for
animated
example,
Summoning Sphere.
Okay.
Zalem
Around
could
your, Titan.
Alright, so Zalem's animating the Summoning Sphere,
Animating
which,
Wildfire.
because the Summoning Sphere is overlapping the Void, the Summoning Sphere dies, which is one of the reasons why
Attacking
Summoning
here
Sphere is a lot
for
weaker
4.
against Enchantress.
Okay.
Then the Wildfire moves across and attacks
And yeah,
Ira for 4. The
This is animated right now?
the self-same Simulacrum
So it's tapped?
animated.
has, I think, copied the Retanus Titan.
Okay.
Yep. Take your side here for 4, and then
It's already
yeah,
been
this.
here. It's already been here.
Oh, you're right. It can't
Zalem
okay. Either way,
is
that's game.
Okay.
now
Turn
in the
burn
position
you,
where
and yeah, you get the firebolts. GG's.
yeah,
GG.
so the Wildfire moves, and then the Thunderstorm hits Ira, puts them to Death's Door, and then the Chaos Twister in Ira's hand is going to be able to pick up the self-same Simulacrum, get it out of the way, and then the Firebolts will be able to go through. So although Zalem had a minion that was not an aura, that could get in the way of the Firebolts and be immune to the disenchant, Ira, of course, had the Chaos Twister as well that could get that out of the way. And Zalem wasn't able to move the Wildfire back as well to provide an extra body in the way, although that wouldn't have helped because of the disenchant, because the Wildfire had already been there. So a fantastic game 1. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed that. And on to game 2. Congratulations, Ira, on taking out game 1. So here we are back with game 2 in the Tournament of Champion Sorcery League Finals. So Ira took out game 1 with the Deathspeaker. We've had a bit of sideboarding here. And now the players taking on game 2. So can Zalem bring one back and potentially take this final series into a game 3? Zalem leads off again, so of course Zalem was the high seed, played first in the first game, but in this second game in the best of 3 series, Zalem was the loser in the first match, so he gets to choose whether to play first or second. Goes first, starts with an Oasis, and then Ira with a powerful start with 2 cores. So the thing as Deathspeaker, if you have a start that has 2 cores like this, is that you've got to have the gas to back it up. It's all well and good to have a lot of mana, but you can have draws as Deathspeaker where you draw all of your things that don't quite help you advance your game plan, and instead you're just left with a whole lot of mana and not much to do with it. And that's where the Enchantress can really pounce. So if Zalem's able to get blink the Enchantress forward and then get a Wildfire down, and if Ira had not really much going on, then that could be a real problem for Ira in terms of getting their life total chunked down pretty quickly. But instead, Ira gets a defensive Violent out, Zalem's up to 3 mana here, and then passing the turn back. So Ira really wants to hit not Firebolts in these next couple of turns. Ira really wants to hit Wizards. It's all about trying to get some card advantage, trying to get this game into a position where Ira can start accumulating that long game card advantage and dominance the longer that the game drags on, and the longer that Zalem's unable to hit at their life total. Of course, we saw last game Zalem being very, very successful and very effective at taking out all of Ira's minions and stopping Ira from reducing their own life total. So Zalem, I think, went into the second to last turn still on 19 life or thereabouts. Whereas here, we're looking at a situation where Ira has already got a couple of damage in with the Violent and is probably going to want to try and get some more damage in pretty soon. But that Firebolt's Fey Changeling that we saw in Ira's hand, I mean, we've moved now to a more secretive view, so we're not sure exactly what's going on in the players' hands. But we do know that Ira's got that Fey Changeling and Firebolts, which are not really going to help Ira be proactive, nor are they going to help Ira accrue much advantage. So certainly if I was in Ira's shoes here as a Deathspeaker player, I would be feeling a bit nervous. You know, Zalem's got the Apprentice Wizard into 3 cards still left in hand. And if that was a Thunderstorm there that turn that Zalem played, although Zalem does have the Threshold, because there's of course 2 air off the Ruins as well as an air off the Lighthouse. So if that had been a Thunderstorm, Zalem could have played it on top of Ira's Deathspeaker, dealt 3, moved it back to the middle,
Firebolts,
and then the Thunderstorm would have been threatening to attack for 12 over the subsequent, or for 8 at least, over the subsequent 2 turns before it was dispelled, which would be a lot more of a threat for Ira. And that Fey Changing wouldn't do much against that, nor would the Firebolts.
And then
because bouncing a thunderstorm that's animated with the Fey Changeling,
done. Your turn.
not necessarily a great play. I mean, maybe sometimes it'll buy you a bit of
Take a
time,
spell.
but it's also going to give Zalo a bit of a reset on the thunderstorm.
Watch out for a lone tower.
So Zalem playing out a lone tower, getting up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 mana.
Abundance and pass.
Plus the core is 7.
I will.
And Zalem plays out an abundance. So now Zalem has a lot of mana.
7 mana.
So going into Zalem's next turn, they'll have 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9
play-
to play with. So Ira finally hits an Apprentice Wizard. And there's also that Apprentice Wizard on Zalem's side of the board. And last turn I should have mentioned as well, Ira spent that Firebolts to get a couple of damage in on Zalem's avatar and take out that Apprentice Wizard. And that might have looked like probably not a super high value play for the Firebolts, but given the context of the game and what we knew of Ira's hand and Ira's start, getting that Apprentice Wizard into Zalem's cemetery was basically like drawing another card for Ira. So Ira was able to banish that from Zalem's cemetery here now, draw that extra card,
I will
which effectively means the Firebolt's replaced itself.
play Common Sense.
And then Ira can Common Sense here. So this could be a Land Surveyor to allow Ira to keep drawing spells, or it could be an Apprentice Wizard, but instead Ira disenchants the Abundance. Just to really try and both slow Zalem down, as well as get rid of a really massive potential minion that Zalem had. One of the downsides of Abundance, interestingly, from an Enchantress perspective, is that if Zalem were to animate the Abundance and then try and attack into Ira's board, firstly, Ira would be able to block with the Apprentice Wizard, but even assuming the Apprentice Wizard wasn't there,
For a site
Ira would have got additional mana from the Abundance, because the Abundance doesn't care whose side it's on, it just allows the affected sites to generate additional mana. Now, normally, in most avatars other than Enchantress, you're not going to play the Abundance overlapping your opponent's sites. But of course, sometimes the Enchantress wants the Abundance to go in and attack for 5 damage. But the downside there of doing that is you're potentially gifting your opponent some additional mana. Although if you are hitting them for 5 in the process, maybe you don't mind giving them a little bit of extra mana. But no, anytime you're giving particularly this Deathspeaker deck that's got so many options, additional mana, you are potentially asking for trouble.
I will play a
So far, Ira hits the Philosopher's Stone again. Oh no, alarm bells for Zalem. We saw last game the amount of mana discounts that Ira was able to claim from that Philosopher's Stone, including passing it around to the Grandmaster Wizard. It wasn't enough to just get 3 or 4 discounts off the Deathspeaker's spells. Ira had to pass it to the Grandmaster Wizard as well to get that extra discount off the Earth spell when they played the Land Surveyor. It's just an incredible amount of advantage in these kind of Deathspeaker lists. And with 3 cores and the Philosopher's Stone now, firstly, Ira's probably a bit stressed about Zalem's own Atlantean Fate. You know, if Zalem were to land an Atlantean Fate on top of Ira's Deathspeaker, that would be a problem. Although, just like in Game 1, Ira has placed the Deathspeaker on a tower. Now, the interaction between Atlantean Fate and ordinary sites is really interesting. So because Atlantean Fate's flood ability only affects non-ordinary sites, the tower won't be flooded. The Genesis ability that submerges all minions and artifacts on the site would affect Ira's Deathspeaker's artifacts that it's carrying, but it's only if able. So the flood ability would go off, if you like, it would happen, but the Dark Tower wouldn't have been flooded because it's an ordinary site, and Atlantean Fate only affects non-ordinary sites. The Genesis ability of the Atlantean Fate would then function, and the Dark Tower would be an affected site for the purpose of the Atlantean Fate, but it would be unable to submerge the artifacts because the Dark Tower was not flooded. So Ira feeling a bit safe from Zalem's Atlantean Fate, if Zalem would have it in hand, sitting on top of that Dark Tower.
Killing your land
Although, of course, Zalem has now played out the Atlantean Fate, so Ira doesn't have to worry too much about that. So the Violent kills the Land Surveyor. The Infiltrate animates the Atlantean Fate. And then Atlantean Fate has a free path to attack for 5. So Zalem choosing whether to stay where Zalem is.
Your ruins, or I mean your step 4.
But instead,
and it's your turn.
yes, staying where the Atlantean Fate is.
Alright.
So
Start my
Zalem
turn. This
controls
guy's-
Ira's
this guy's
Violin, and it has stealth until it loses stealth, and then it will go back to Ira's control. But of course, Ira's got an interesting conundrum here. So does Ira want to bounce the Atlantean Fate? That will unlock some of Ira's threshold. So of course, Zalem's play of Atlantean Fate turned off the windmill and turned off the step
Alright,
from a threshold perspective.
Let's play a
But
Titan here.
with the fact that Ira's got the core, the ruby
For
core,
1, 2,
Ira does still
3,
have a
4,
fire
5,
threshold.
6.
But if Ira were to need a second fire
Same
threshold,
size.
they may consider bouncing the Atlantean Fate. However, no need to bounce the Atlantean Fate when you've got a Rattanis Titan in hand. So Rattanis Titan comes down, slams down on that Vilimp, which was under Zalem's control, slams
use
down
my
on the
Earth.
Atlantean Fate, takes that out as well, and then leaves behind a beefy body that Ira will be able to use on
Killing
subsequent
your imp.
turns
I'm just
to
gonna
try and get
delete
in for a
this
bit
one.
of damage.
Right.
Then
That
Violent
costs
comes
me
in,
1.
takes out the self-same Simulacrum, which had copied the other Violent,
And then I will...
and all of a sudden, it's all swung back the other way. The board position that was very much in Zalem's favour there for a second, with that animated
this
Atlantean
land
Fate, the two
surveyor.
Vilimps, one of which was stolen from Ira.
For
Now we're in a
no,
situation where
that
Ira's got
doesn't-
their own Vilimp sitting there,
'cause
and a
I don't
Rattanis
have
Titan
one mana
ready to beat down next
okay.
turn.
I will tap, play...
The thing
this,
about that, though, that
uh,
Zalem's going to be
windmill,
looking at
and
is,
then
well,
go
last
use
game,
this,
Zalem managed to avoid being
land
hit for
surveyor,
so long,
so
right? Like, Zalem managed to
last
protect
mana,
their life total really well,
and
and Ira's damage pieces, which are really the ruler of Thor and the Rattanis Titan, only just managed to get Zalem to death's door. And then Ira's firebolts, which was, I think, the last real sort of threat that Ira had left in the deck,
We'll move up here. And
only just
major
managed to take out
explosion.
the Enchantress. So
I'll take 3.
Zalem moves up, takes out the Rattanis Titan with a major explosion, takes out the Violin,
Past you.
deals a bit of damage to Ira, but also unfortunately deals a bit of damage to themselves.
start my
So if
turn.
Zalem had
I
had
will
an
draw
apprentice wizard or a
a
grandmaster wizard that could have cast that major explosion, they wouldn't have needed to move the Enchantress up to get in proximity range to be able to take out the Rattanis Titan with the major explosion. But unfortunately, Enchantress having to get right in there
here.
and take some of the blowback from the major explosion in the form of 3 damage.
Mana.
The real downside there as well of the Enchantress moving up is that it's
guess I'll
super
start
dangerous
by
to be adjacent to one of
playing a
Ira's
wizard
sites where Ira can summon the Violimps.
For
Because all of a sudden now, Ira's in the
I've
position
used
where for
my
1 mana, so
here,
long as they've got a Violimp left in
and
their
I draw
cemetery,
a
they
spell.
can just get in for 2 damage, get in for 2 damage
Okay.
on the Enchantress using the Violimp's Genesis ability. And when Zalem's already down to 13, we start to get into pretty dangerous territory where, yes, the Rattanis Titan
I'll use this imp
is now in the cemetery,
do,
so Ira still can use the
you.
Genesis ability.
that costs me.
Still gets one more go with it, so long as Zalem doesn't draw that Pillar of Xeros. But
fire.
other than the Rattanis Titan's Genesis
And
ability,
then I
Ira's really down to
will
the ruler of Thule
play
plays.
this imp.
Except that
Bring 2 to you.
Ira's
That
now got
costs
another
me,
Violimp, so there was
2.
2 from the Violimp from the cemetery, and now 2 from this Violimp.
then
And
I
really the
will
tables have turned
play-
now in terms of chip damage, getting that life
I'll
total
play
down,
this Fey Changeling
and the Fey
here.
Changeling just adding insult to injury
Turn
now.
this to my hand.
Where Zalem's sort of thinking,
And
I had to move my Enchantress up because I had to take out that Rattanis Titan.
Sorry. I'm gonna play a side.
Oh,
But in doing so, I've really exposed myself to these Violent attacks, and that it's a huge risk with the Fey Changelings in Ira's list,
so you have an imp in
because
hand.
not only do you take the 2 on entry and the 2 from the cemetery, 4 damage per Violent,
Need to be
but Ira
able-
can up that by an additional 2 damage for each Violent every time that the Fey Changeling comes down and bounces
Play
it.
Wildfire
And
here.
then, of course, the Fey Changeling has its own Genesis ability. So that's
Move
another
back
2
faster.
damage.
burning the.
So the Wildfire burns the
Changeling.
Fey Changeling, but Ira's not too upset about that, because now Ira can go, play my Violent,
Actually,
and then Fey Changeling return the Violent to hand.
actually, do you mind? Instead of moving back, we'll just tap.
So Zalem was going to move back with the Enchantress to get out of the firing line from these Violents
just
and say,
copy
that's enough for me, I
and,
don't want to cop it anymore.
Great.
But instead, Zalem's
Copy
playing
this.
out the Lighthouse
Play
and
Thunderstorm
playing out the
now.
Thunderstorm, so going for the more
And,
aggressive
yeah, we'll
play.
pass turn, burning the.
So we had the Wildfire
Changeling
into Thunderstorm, 8
and
mana, a It's a pretty big play.
This will roll. We'll do odd your avatar. So yeah, this will burn first.
One second. You're burning.
So the wildfire
at the end
burned
of
the Fey changeling that was
so
there.
the wildfire will resolve first.
And then the thunderstorm. So Zalem just backtracking a bit. He'd quickly gone ahead and killed the Fey changeling already, but he had another play to do on his turn before the end of turn. So we're going back to play the thunderstorm. The thunderstorm randomly hits either the avatar or the apprentice wizard. Zalem rolls and manages to hit the avatar. So pretty strong play this turn. You know, both players on 9.
Go ahead.
Great.
Getting Ira down to 9 life with a thunderstorm threatening more damage from the strikes plus threatening more damage from attacks on the wildfire.
Okay.
It's a pretty big threat. But the problem that Zalem faces is that by doing that and going to 8 mana and tapping the Enchantress to play the site that turn, Zalem did leave their Enchantress exposed to these violent plays. And Zalem knows that there's a Violent in hand, knows that there's that Fey changeling in the cemetery, meaning that with the Philosopher's Stone discounts and an Apprentice Wizard to hand the stone to,
common sense.
That's a lot of damage that Ira can be putting out this turn. And if there is still a Violent in Ira's deck, I haven't been counting them as we've been going through here, but we'll see what Ira grabs. If it is a Violent, it's a Firebolts. Still not great. Still not great for Zalem.
Let me just
because we can go Violent, then Fey Changeling, bounce the Violent, play the Violent again, move up, Firebolts the Enchantress, and that's 7 damage. So beyond that, I was just got to find 2 more. I don't know if there's still a Violent in the cemetery here at this point as well, because that would do it.
The stone, have my wizard.
So there we go. The drop the stone, have the wizard pick it up, play another common sense. So get the discount again for a second time, get another Firebolts, well, that'll do it. The double Firebolts combined with the Violent, bounce the Violent, and then play the Violent again, is going to be 10 damage.
Firebolts with my wizard to do.
So playing the Firebolts with the wizard, using the discount from the Philosopher's Stone.
That costs me 1. I will
drop the Philosopher's Stone, give it back to the Deathspeaker.
Drop the Philosopher's Stone, have my Deathspeaker.
Probably play the other Firebolts or the Violent.
And then
both of them are probably going to get played.
Deathspeaker will play Firebolts. That cost me 1.
And then
now I will
Violent, Fey Changeling, and Violent is going to be exactly 6 mana.
For 2.
Fey Changeling from the cemetery, of course.
I will. I haven't used water yet.
So Ira uses the Fey Changeling from the cemetery, bounces that Violent back to hand, and then plays the Violent again. Then they will get Zalem down to Death's Door.
I will.
They still have a Violent in the cemetery. No need for the Fey Changeling. So down goes that.
And then I will tap to draw.
And Ira's got no spells in hand here, which is interesting.
All right. Wildfire will move.
So Zalem's gone down to Death's Door, which is not great from Zalem's perspective. But Ira likewise,
take a spell.
No cards in hand. Zalem has 2 cards now. Not a guarantee that Ira's going to be able to finish the game next turn if Zalem moves back.
Pact of the Devil, animating the Wildfire.
So Zalem plays a Pact of the Devil, goes down to 4 mana.
I'm going to shuffle just in case I didn't shuffle. I'm almost sure I did, but
and you know, while Pact of the Devil is powerful, super powerful at Death's Door when you don't have to lose any life or sacrifice anything, Zalem does get to animate that Wildfire, which means
Firebolts,
really good chance they'll be able to push Ira to Death's Door this turn.
The Wildfire.
Kills the Wizard and the Imp, meaning the Thunderstorm Strike is going to hit.
Take it for 4.
The Deathspeaker. So 4 damage comes down from the Wildfire.
Here.
The Enchantress moves back. The Thunderstorm's going to hit for 3 at the end of the turn.
Riptide the Avatar.
Zalem Riptides the Avatar across onto the lighthouse so that it's a little bit safer from projectiles. And the Thunderstorm puts Ira down to 2. So this game's getting super close too. You know, Ira's in top deck mode.
I want to move it.
And Zalem moves the Thunderstorm back. So Zalem's saying, look, can you draw a Summoning Sphere? You know, if Ira draws Summoning Sphere, then
yes.
Zalem knows there's a Violin Pit and a Returner's Titan
Return,
that Ira's
draw
going to
spell.
be able to reanimate. But short of Summoning Sphere...
Well, that's very tough deck.
Oh my goodness.
Good
well,
game.
yeah, I mean,
man, what a lovely
Zalem
deck.
at that point is
I had a
like...
few.
Yeah.
Earthquake would have done it.
there's not a
Chaos
lot.
Twister, no.
Yeah, you had answers.
So Earthquake...
I had some Rule of
As,
would have done it. Courtesan would have done it, but not that many. Grandmaster Wizard would have gotten me some draws, but
Ira's saying that
Good
Earthquake would have
games,
done it
good
because they
games,
could have
Adam.
rearranged the sites to put
Yeah, that's
the
pretty rough.
Enchantress next to the
I'm
Violin,
not gonna lie.
or next to Ira's sites.
Yeah, it's a tough match.
Chaos
Listen,
Twister would have done it.
I
It
felt
could have
like,
Chaos
the luck
Twisted the
was definitely
Wildfire,
on your
tried to
side
hit the
pretty heavily.
Enchantress, potentially.
Oh, for
But you
sure.
played well too.
But
So,
that Summoning Sphere off the top was
did what
exactly
it
exactly
could.
what Ira needed.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
this is
And
true.
Ira did get out of
Both
that early
games had
hole. I mean, I think
threshold
the firebolts on the Apprentice Wizard early to get the card draw going was a super important play, because Ira was potentially in a bit of a hole there with the double core start, as good as it can be, because there wasn't the gas to back it up. So anyway, thank you for watching. That was a incredibly high level, high quality gameplay match. You know, it really showcased the best of Sorcery gameplay in terms of using positioning, using tempo, using board position to try and accumulate advantage. Two decks that can really land those haymakers, but also have the tools to control the enemy's gameplay, dancing around each other a bit, taking their time, trying to get into that advantageous position to be able to land that killing blow. And both Zalem and Ira played that expertly. Ira coming out on top there in that second game with an incredible top deck of that Summoning Sphere. So well done to both Zalem and Ira. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed. And we will see you very soon with some more coverage of Sorcery Contested Realm. I've been Jesse Meulman-Marshall. It's been great to be with you.